Hi, I played in a sealed deck tournament this weekend, and I ended up winning, and I won this Illuminator's Trove for winning, and I thought it would be worth making a video to show you what my polls were and what my strategy was for building my deck, so hopefully this can help you in tournaments this weekend as well. So maybe I'll open this Trove in another video, but I'll put that aside for now. So what is the format of the sealed tournament? You get 6 booster packs, and from those booster packs you have to build a 40 card deck. That 40 card deck can have any or all of the inks if you want, and then there's no limit on the number of cards either. So if you had more than 4, if you have 5 or 6 duplicates, you could use those duplicates. Although I don't think I have anything that I pulled more than 2 of the same card, but if you did, you could. And then you get 30 minutes to build your deck. And that's kind of the main pressure point right there, is if you don't have a strategy going for building your deck, you might spend more time and end up with a deck that you're not happy with. So I hope in this video I can show you how to very quickly build a deck. And so what I did is I started by opening all the packs and just piling them up into one pile, and then I went through and decided to sort them by ink cost, because I wanted to have a good distribution of the ink cost. So I did that already, and I put at the top here the ones that I didn't like and the ones at the bottom that I did, and these are pre-sorted, so I can show you real quick how I did that. And then I have some of these are sleeved and some of them aren't. The ones that are sleeved I either used or I was considering using, and these are kind of sorted in the order that I had them, so you don't have to watch me sort through them. This. For deciding which ones were good and weren't good, I'd played the game a bit, so I had a little bit of intuition, but I also watched some videos online of what people thought were good or bad cards, and that helped a lot in making my decision process. I didn't always agree with them, but at the same time, I think the ones that you don't agree with are probably the ones that you're going to make strategic choices in your deck, or whether you want to use them or not. And so here's the ones I used: 2s, 3s. In just a second here, I'm going to walk you through why I decided these were the ones I wanted to use, and then why I decided picking the ones up there that I picked. I got really lucky in my pulls in this deck as well. I ended up with, I believe, 2 legendaries and 4 super rares. And also, I think, based on what I saw from other people weren't pulling quite as big of the high numbers on the top end here, so I got a lot of 6s and 7s. And I did know that based on that, if I wanted to see if I can use these higher number cards and really go for the questing power that these cards had, but I needed to be able to ramp to do that as well. And so kind of starting on the far right here, I'll tell you why I decided what I decided to use here. I put Mickey out right away as a card I probably didn't want to use, because in this format you don't really get to pick the cards, and for an uninkable 7 I think that's a pretty risky play, because that could end up being in your hand for quite a while if you don't have any ramp. So I just put that aside, and then also you have to have enough Mickeys to make it worthwhile, and you have to have enough actions to make it worthwhile. And in this format I actually strategically decided to use very few actions and very few items, only the ones that were really going to help me win. I didn't put anything else in there. I tried to focus on mostly characters. For the 7 cards I had, I just put all of them in there to start, and I didn't really take anything out, because they're all, some of them are vanilla, but they're all inkable, so I could use them as ink if I wanted to. If I was able to build up to this number, then I knew that they would be pretty powerful at that stage. And then I got a little bit of draw power from Stitch. I'll tell you what, in the 3 games that I played, I did not use a single one of these cards. I think I inked these 2, but they were there if I needed them. And then for my 6 cards, this was probably, I'd say, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. It was the VIP of the game, because when Tinkerbell comes out there and is able to deal 1 damage to each other character, and then also deal 2 damage when banishing, she really was able to control the board for me when I needed her. And so I was just, every game that I had her in my hand, I tried to keep her there, and when I mulliganed, I was hoping I would get this card, and she absolutely delivered. I never played Mother Gothel, although I really liked her. I think she's just a really powerful super rare card. And so I had her in there. I didn't play Tigger, I actually ended up inking him a lot. And for Stitch, I kind of the same reasoning as some of these other ones. I just figured in this format, you're going to want to get a lot of lore. I think that I was also playing against people that hadn't played the game a whole lot, and so they were probably playing around with challenging and different actions and whatnot. And so I knew that if I was just going to quest aggressively, that would probably work in these early days. And then I actually did have 2 Tiggers. And then Taka was great as well. I was able to use Taka, where you can challenge somebody else to gain 2 lore, or just quests. You're basically just always getting lore out of this one. And a legendary, what a great pull, I think, for this format. It was really good to have. Kuzco, kind of similar reasoning, lots of lore, solid card. I think it's great in any deck like this, especially when you're doing as much aggro as I was going for. I know Merlin is kind of a debatable card on whether people like him or not, but I figured I want a little bit of control power in there. He's going to be questing, and I can use the support So I decided to put him in there originally without really any debate at all in my head, even though I know other people might not like support quite as much. Hans, oh my gosh. Actually, if there's any second like VIP place, I know that Tinkerbell was probably number 1 for me, but Hans is number 2 because I got him out early and he was questing for a lot. And because of some of the other cards I had, I was able to control the other players and just quest. I think there was one game that I quested with him, I think it was 4 times or something like that to win the game because of the high amount of lore power he had. So really, also really good card for me to have, and he's only rare, so there's a good chance you could have gotten that one as well. Tinkerbell. Again, she's got evasive and 2 lore. There was one game that I played her very last and ended up winning the game with her. And Maleficent and Hades. Again, this is another card that I think is debatable on whether people like this in their deck or not, but this one definitely helped me win one of my games where I had Tinkerbell and Hades in my hand. I played Tinkerbell. I went ahead and let her get sacrificed because the other player was just like, ooh, Tinkerbell's scary, I'm gonna get rid of that card. And then I just right away turned around, played Hades, and got Tinkerbell back on the board. And the other player was just like, oh my gosh, they knew that I had him at that point because they spent so much time and effort controlling Tinkerbell and getting her off the board, and then I just brought her right back on with Hades. So really cool, really fun game with that one. And then for my 3-cost cards, I wanted to build up to these high lore value cards, and I actually did choose to use whatever bodyguard I could find. And so you actually see I have Simba over here and Hercules because I knew that once I got to these points of these high value cards, I wanted the players to be attacking the bodyguards instead. So that's why I include bodyguards in there. Cheshire Cat, another card that's just good lore value and forces the other player to deal with you. I think this is a card that I can't remember online if people like this one or not. I think most people tend to not like this one. But again, this early game, I wanted to have a little bit of control power, so I decided to have this rush card in my hand. And I wouldn't even play this one right away. I would just hold on to it until I needed it. And it actually did work to my advantage one time. Mickey Mouse for ramp power was great to have. Jasper for forcing the other player to not quest. Really good card in this game as well, in this format. I think players, I saw a lot of people inking this card and had underestimated how good this card is. I would recommend playing it and controlling the other player from questing. I think there was one other player that quested this and, inked this in his 3rd or 4th turn when I was sitting there continuously pushing out Hans, and it would have been really great if he had Jasper to control Hans from questing instead. So don't underestimate how good this card is. And then Friends on the other side for draw power, which I also utilized quite well. And then for my 2s, again, bodyguards. I wanted these bodyguards not necessarily in the early game, but I wanted them in order to help protect some of my questers later on. But, as a 2-turn, I don't think it's too bad either. And then for ramp, Grammatala and Lantern. There was one game that I actually ended up very early having just in my hand all 3 of these. This was basically my ramp, and so I got so quickly up to my 6 cards. I think actually in that game, now that I remember it, I ended up inking Grammatala because these 2 were enough for me to start playing 6s. And then let's see, for the 1s, I was pretty excited to get Pascal. There was one game that I played that Pascal was out there. I always had other cards out there, and he was just inking. I probably got 4 or 5 ink out of Pascal just because of his evasive maneuver. So I recommend that. And then Fire the Cannons just to help you control that early game if you need to. So this is just the way that I started, and then everything else up here was kind of vanilla or abilities that I didn't necessarily think I needed. And so I kind of went through and did as I counted how many cards I had in each ink cost here. And I thought roughly, going into this blind, I thought that I would probably want to have something like 7 1s, 7 2s, 7 3, 7 4, maybe 6 or so 5s and up from there. But I didn't end up with a lot of 5s, so those 5s got shifted to 6, and I ended up with just more 6s and 7s than I really thought I was going to get, honestly. And so this is what I was looking at, and I worked from the bottom up at this point, where I knew that I wanted probably at least 4 playable characters in the 1s, and the ones I ended up picking were just some vanilla cards, solid 2/2s with Archimedes and Duke of Wesselton, basically the same cards. I know people don't love Captain Hook, but I was kind of hoping that I wouldn't get Captain Hook in the first turn, and I'd get him later on to help me with challenging, and I did end up playing him one time that way, which was pretty good. And so I only ended up using 4 playable ones here. And then for the 2s, kind of same thing. I didn't end up using a huge number of them. I ended up putting these in there, again, with the challengers. I have 2 challengers early on, and the point of the challengers isn't it was more to help me protect some of the higher cost cards later on, so these could be challenged and just sacrificed, while I kept the higher lore count cards out there, and then I kind of used Megaruff for the same reason. So you'll kind of see this theme now, where my lower level cards, or my lower cost cards, are protecting and challenging, and my higher cost cards are for questing, and that's sort of the strategy I went for here. I ended up, on this 3 count, I ended up putting some higher lore, some higher questing value cards in here, just because I needed to fill the deck. I think I had Mickey in there as well. And realizing that I didn't have a lot of 1s and 2s, I wanted to make sure to sort of fill those in the 3s, because again, I think roughly, and I don't know the strategy, it'll be interesting to see how this goes over time, but I think roughly somewhere between like 6 or 7 of the 1s, 2s, and 3s, and you can kind of shift a little bit from there as well. And then I ended up going pretty heavy on my 4s here as well. I had Pumbaa, I think more for the willpower. I just had to fill my deck with him, so I wasn't really that excited about him. And then I did have a couple challengers here for Jafar. I think I ended up inking these pretty much every time that I used them. And this was sort of a wild card in there. I knew I could ink it if I needed to, but I was thinking that if I got to a point where the opponent had just a couple cards in their hand, I thought I could really disrupt them with this. Never used it. And then I sleeved Mickey thinking I was going to use him. I did not end up playing Mickey, because in this format you don't have a lot of ability to necessarily combo cards that play off of each other, and he requires the broom. I only had 1 broom, so I left him out. And then I did end up putting Moana in there. I know that her ability is specifically to target and banish to Ka, but she had the lore, and I think I just wanted a couple more 5-cost cards in there. I had to kind of choose between her and Starkey, and I just decided to use Moana for the lore value, and then you saw the other cards in here. So this is it. This is the deck I ended up playing with. I might have messed this up because I was sleeving some cards and putting them in binders and took them all back out to put them here, so I haven't gone through and counted all these. But the nice thing you can see about this is you can kind of see the rough distribution of numbers that I have, where it wasn't bad for me to have only 4 1s, and it looks like I had just a handful of, looks like 5 2 characters, and then I was pretty heavy in the 3s and 4s. And I would say most of the games that I was playing, I had a pretty significant lead once I was at this 4 and 5 area, and then I sealed the deal with the 6s. And there was the one game I mentioned with the Tinkerbell that I kind of won the game with Tinkerbell, but overall the sweet spot I think for this format is going to be the 3 4s and 5s, but I didn't have a lot of 5s to play. After reviewing the video, I wanted to come back real quick and talk about 2 things. I want to talk about Uninkables, and I want to talk about which cards I chose to not use, so you get a chance to look at those. And so starting off with the first topic, Uninkables. A lot of people are worried about how many Uninkables should they have, why should they have them, and whatnot. And the way I think about Uninkables is I think about only put the ones in there that you know you absolutely want to use, that you would prioritize those over any other ones. And so it's less about counts and more about what is that card providing for you. And so the ones I ended up using here, and also there's another thing I think about too, which is if you're going to actually have a handful of Uninkables, especially in the early game, it would probably not be too horrible to have an Uninkable that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, that you're just playing in that order. And so those are kind of the 2 ways I think about Uninkables. But again, you kind of get what you get to use what you have. And so I knew Fire the Cannons is just a great action card, so I would use it eventually. I would use it at the right time, so good Uninkable. This one I was hoping to get in my initial hand or in my mulligan, and I would use it, and obviously utilize its ability as a ramp card. For Mickey Mouse, same thing. I'd pretty much play him whenever. If I was out of, if I had all the ink I wanted and I got him in the later game, I'd just use him as a character. He's not a great character, but at least I have him. I would be able to sort of combo him with Merlin and use the support to maybe have him for more strength. But again, trying to get him in the early game for ramp. And then for both Peter Pan and Hades, I had these purely in my hand for their abilities and to try to use them at the right time. So if they're in my hand, I would sit on them and wait, and I knew that they would both be able to be utilized eventually. And so with Peter Pan, you have the rush ability where you can do 3 damage, and then with Hades, you have the drawing a card from your discard pile. And Hades was definitely a good card to have in this format, so that worked out well for me. And then Kuzco is just an overall really good 5 card. I'd want to play him no matter what. His ability is great, so there's no way that I was going to want to ink him if I had it in my hand. So those are my Uninkables. And I mentioned before that I put Mickey up here right away. He's got an ability that I wouldn't want to use, and so I just decided to leave him out. There's no point in putting him in there if there's other cards that have better abilities that I'm more likely to utilize. Especially since if I got him early on, he's just sitting there and I don't have to wait. So talking about the cards that I didn't use, I had mentioned again that I tried to focus on characters instead of items and actions. So unless an item and action is really giving me something that I wanted, I would discard them. I would just put them not into my deck right away. So we have Dinglehopper, Healing Glow, Goons is a vanilla card that I just decided he just didn't make the cut. Timon, I don't really love his ability, so I left him out. Here's another action card, Control Your Temper, just not that great. Magic, Golden Flower, wasn't a card that I thought I would utilize. Reflection, I just don't think is a good card in the game overall. He's got a sword, this could be utilized, but I think I would just rather have a good character, a good one character in my hand than use this action. And then, especially since I had very little draw power in this game, I only had one, what did I have? I guess I had Hades, which allowed me to get cards back, and then I also had one on the Friends on the Other Side. And then Captain Hook. I did have a Captain Hook in here, but I didn't want to have too many Captain Hooks. I just wanted one to utilize them, so I actually just decided to leave this other one out. For the twos that I didn't use, well, there's the first one I have LeFou, which is a vanilla card. He's fine. He has more lore, but I just decided he didn't make the cut for me. Brooms isn't really that useful without having Mickey. Sudden Chill, an action song. I think this is a good card, but because I didn't have a lot of draw power, I didn't want to put this in my hand. And you're really just trading not having a card with the other player, and so I just didn't think it would be that fun to have anyway. Dr. Pelitz's cards, an item card, Magic Mirror, super expensive. Phil, I think is just the misbalance of strength and willpower. It wasn't very interesting to me. Tamatoa, same thing, kind of misbalance of strength and willpower, wasn't interesting to me. Gaston, I think Gaston's actually, there's a place for Gaston in the game, but in this specific format, I was going more for questing and protecting, so I didn't want to be necessarily a super aggressive player, so I'll leave him out. And then Aladdin. Ward is okay, but I just felt like it just didn't make the cut. And then, let's see for these other ones here. Belle, I didn't have really any items, so I wasn't going to utilize her ability, and there's just better stat line cards than her, so she didn't make the cut. Break is an action card that I didn't think was really worthwhile of having. Mickey's just a vanilla card, didn't make the cut. Aladdin, I think his stat line just wasn't good enough for me, and I thought that I was going to be outpacing my opponents in lore anyway, so there's no point in me trying to push them out of lore. And then Wardrobe, another vanilla card that just didn't quite make it in there. And for the fours, Mickey, I talked a little bit already that I just didn't want to use him because I didn't have the combo abilities. Hakuna Matata, I just don't think it's a very good card. Ariel, I didn't have very many items in my deck, so there's no point in using her ability. Elsa, I'm actually not super fond of this card in general. I just don't think it's that great. I do like Scar. I know people on the internet don't love Scar, but I just didn't think that I would be playing very many players that I'd be able to utilize him, and he didn't fit into my strategy for this deck, so I didn't use him. And then I already had one of these in my deck. I didn't think I needed to. I wasn't even sure if I was going to play with one of them, and I never did, so left that one out. Starkey just didn't quite make the cut on my fives because I ended up focusing more on the sixes and sevens, and then we already talked about Mickey. So those are the cards that I didn't use. A lot of actions and items ended up just not being used, and I was very, very, very careful about which ones I picked. I know I mentioned that before, but I want to emphasize that in this format, especially if you're new to the game, you probably don't want a lot of items and actions unless you know you're going to use them. I hope this was helpful. I know this is a format that we're all kind of still learning and getting to know, but at the same time I thought it would be fun to just show you real quick, get this video out there pretty quickly about what my strategy was, how I thought about it, and then that's basically it. So I hope you guys all enjoy playing this weekend, and let me know in the comments below what you thought, and if you have a different way of thinking about building a deck for a sealed tournament like this. Thanks everyone, goodbye.